let's bring the citizen developers on. And I really am excited to talk a little bit more about the journeys, about what it's looked like on the other side of that, coming into the program that's already been successful and has an expectation and has maybe some pressure associated with it. So with that, welcome. And if we could, it would be great just to give a brief introduction of your background and of how you've come into this RPA space, whether as a developer or citizen developer. Jose, maybe we could start with you.
Okay. Hello, I'm Jose. I'm in SDI working as automation developer for the last 2 years. I have been working around with John since the time that we start looking for different options of which companies we were going to choose for automation processes and businesses.
Great. Thank you so much for joining. Jen, if you wouldn't mind going next, tell us about your background and how you've come into this RPA space.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer Wynn. I am a client procurement manager with SDI. I've been with SDI for about 3.5 years, and during my time here, I have been exposed to various different roles within SDI. I was involved in category management. More recently, I was on the sourcing team before I joined my client procurement manager team. So with that in mind, during my sourcing roles and during my other roles, I was engaged in a lot of monotonous tasks. These were daily tasks I had to do every day, and they were very repetitive, and there was a lot of opportunity to automate those processes. And now that I'm in a client-facing role, I got into this program so that I can automate these tasks so that I can focus on the more strategic tasks I have in place for my clients.
That's great. Thank you. Taryn, welcome. And please, a little bit about your background and how you've come into this space.
Sure. So my name is Taryn Niels. I'm a sourcing analyst for about 3 years at SDI. So what that role involves, it's basically collecting and analyzing data across our clients' operations. So whether it's pricing materials or analyzing a vendor's efficiency, that's mainly what I do from day to day. So a lot of that is, as Jen even said, very mundane, repetitive tasks. So UiPath has been very helpful with speeding those processes up. So I'm very grateful to be on the team.
Excellent. Thank you. And Joe, welcome. Please, a bit about your background and how you came into RPA.
Yeah, I guess I'm the director of purchasing for the New York City Department of Education client here at SDI. And I guess I kind of came at this a little bit through the side door, I think. We have a pretty robust onboarding process here at SDI, and I got the benefit of getting to meet with all the different department heads, and one of those being John. And in my past lives, I've done quite a bit of automation, from screen scraping, from telnet terminal emulators and things like that. So I've always seen the value in that. And so as soon as we started talking about this, my ears perked up, and I'm like, even though I'm at a director level and not so much down in the weeds on a lot of things, I knew right away that this was something that I wanted to get involved in. And so I had the opportunity to speak with my hiring manager as a VP over under our group. And as soon as I mentioned it, he's like, maybe you should ask John if you could join that team as well. And I did. And, he and I had bonded during that first session. So I was able to join and, like I said, recognize the value here. So it's something that I'm always looking for opportunities to do this.
That's excellent. It's interesting because you've each come to this space from different angles, but already there's some common narratives around what you've experienced previously, and then how you're experiencing the work now, and some of those outlooks. I'd really like to know, can you put your finger on it? What is the shift between being an employee of the organization, then to having the ability to automate things on top of your job? Like, how do you think about your work differently because of that? Maybe Joe, we can start with you.
Sure. In fact, that's one of the challenges again from my particular role is that I don't have as much exposure down deep in the organization, but I do a lot of manipulation of files and things like that on a pretty regular basis. And so for me, it's not even necessarily just the time savings, because some of the things I've done for myself using the tool Studio X is what I'm using. Have they only reduce time by a few minutes perhaps, but what it gives me is the total confidence that it's getting done right every time, that I'm not rushing this time and I missed something. And so that's one of the things that and I mentioned this in our team meetings all the time, is we'll be talking about, wow, this saved a lot of time. But at the end of the day, it's that peace of mind that I walk away with every day when I click that button and I know that it's doing exactly the same every time. I think that's one of the undersold values, like you said, mentioning value points. So yeah, I think from my perspective, having and doing a little bit of development myself, even at this level, allows me to see opportunities within my group much more quickly, and understanding what the app can do it's extremely valuable.
That's great. Taryn, I'd like to ask the same question to you. How do you compare your mindset before citizen development to your mindset after embracing and using these tools?
Yeah, so I mean, I was always very comfortable with Excel. I would call it my baby. I knew every formula to exist. So with UiPath, it was definitely a learning curve. But what I learned is that I was able to transfer a lot of that knowledge into UiPath. So when I went into it very scared and not knowing if I'd be able to handle it all, it's been such a huge learning opportunity. And it's been great. Now I can save a bunch of time on my projects, the time that I would spend typing out formulas that would go on for pages. It's been huge for that sense. But yeah, now that I go into a lot of my meetings and I come out of it saying like, hey, let's build a bot for it, because I'd rather do that than waste a bunch of time each day. So it's been very helpful.
I love that. I almost can't think of a better outcome from a meeting than saying, hey, let's automate something, or let, like, your action item isn't to have another meeting or to talk to more people. It's to do something, to take. Jen, going over to you, how do you compare your mindset pre-RPA citizen developer to now, and how you're approaching business and your tasks?
So I think getting involved in UiPath has really changed my way of thinking about processes and steps in place for various tasks I have at hand. So whenever I get tasked with a new project, instead of my usual method, I'll just get at it. I think of all the similarities that I have with existing projects, and then with that thought process in mind, I'm thinking, hey, how can I automate this? So like, just have each process has been different so far, but trying to identify those common similarities and create an automation process that will not only help my new process at hand, but future processes as well, if I have similarities with previous ones. So it's interesting because it makes me think of things differently. Instead of working harder, we're working smarter, right? So how are we making it more efficient for any task I have?
Awesome. I'm hearing themes here across the different responses of moving from task-based thinking to systems thinking, moving from treating each thing as a discrete activity to looking at the commonalities across the different types of work that you're doing. Am I reaching, or is that what you've been experiencing?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's interesting because, during the first phases of UiPath development, my skills were only so much, right? So you start building simple bots, and then you realize how much more you can add on to that process. So not only you're building new bots, you're expanding to old bots to help create the system even more efficient down the line and do more. So yeah, it's been cool.
I don't know if I can jump in here, but that's something that I see as a great value point also, is that as particularly citizen developers are able to develop their bots, they end up with a different view of the process that they've automated. And at some point you were like, man, I was adding X, Y, and Z information to my process. And now that I've freed up 80% more bandwidth, maybe I can actually afford to put in other information that I hadn't been able to do before because it would have just been too much, and we just took what the bare minimum that we needed to get the job done. And now we've taken an added value to that existing process just because we could afford to through automation.
Right. So that initial simple bot was able to save us X amount of time. And with that time, because we have that time freed up, we can even develop more time to expand that bot to do even more for us.
If you're focused on the specific ROI for a specific scenario, you might miss some of this compound interest, as you say.
You're totally correct. And I think that's one of the benefits of this ecosystem that we have here, right? Joe automated something that took 5 minutes. Yeah, okay, that might not look like that much on a P&L sheet, but it'll never be wrong. He'll never have to redo it. He could do it anytime he wants just by pushing play, right? And that is tremendous. The other thing, and it may not be directly on the topic of that compounding time interest, but I think it's a common narrative that we should get to, and I'm sure we'll get Jose's in here in a minute, but all of these things, like especially where Jen is talking about where, oh, I saw this process and this process is very similar. We have a team meeting every 2 weeks where we go through and we review these processes. And I actually elect a lucky winner, one of the 10 each week, to present one of these processes. And the goal there is, number one, we cycle through developers from time to time. So as somebody new comes on, they can see what we're doing or whatever. But the real goal is that we have discussions live and talk about how to improve these bots together and say, oh, I made a similar bot. I know you're stuck on step 9. I did this. And I'm not making it up. That's happened already. And you could ask any one of the people on the call and they'd attest to that.
That's awesome. And every time we talk about a company and how a company is embracing technology, it never fails. It's a technology beginning to the story, but the end of the story is human. It's all about how we're interacting. With that, Jose, I'd really like to hear your story, because you're coming at this from a different angle than some of the other citizen developers. You were there from the beginning. So you've had this arc of helping to set up and establish, to enable and participate. And now as you're moving to the COE, that's quite a journey. What has that been like for you? And how have you seen people coming into this space evolve their thinking?
Okay. Well, since the beginning, I had exposure with John to a lot of processes from the company, processes that were automated and processes that were really not possible because they require sentiment values and contact information. But right now, since we start to moving and increasing the size of the people that is involved in these automation processes, I feel that the value and the culture of the company is changing. People know more about automation, and it's not only from me and from John. All the departments have at least one person that is involved with these processes. So the way of thinking of all the employees is changing. Since the directives and IT business side, everyone is now thinking in how they can automate processes and focus their time into what they should be doing more, analyzing, thinking, instead of manual and repetitive tasks that they were doing before. And I have feel that people is seeing automation in a good way. In the past, as John said before, they were feeling oh yeah, this process is going to remove my job. But now they're feeling oh, I do not need to be clicking this button 10,000 times in a day if I can be doing more help in thinking and using my knowledge for add value to the company. I think that's how citizen development has changed the mind of all the employees in the company and the culture.
That's really interesting that you say that. And I'd like to open up this question to all of the citizen developers. If, as John mentioned, there's 10 citizen developers, but Jose, you're saying those 10 citizen developers aren't just hoarding the benefits of RPA for themselves. This is having a broader impact across the organization. What does that look like? And how are you interacting with other people within SDI?
The IT side, and I work with multiple departments, and sometimes I work with some of the citizen developers too for heavy lifting processes. And mostly of the work, how it comes to me is employees I work with different departments and I add the citizen developer that is required for that area and I'm involved in the process. But yeah, I think that all the departments of the company are like getting more along, and I really feel the increase of tickets that I'm getting. I'm working with ticketing system, and I was getting maybe like 1-2 requests per week in the last 6 months, and in the last 2 months, one last month, I'm getting like maybe 10 tickets, 20 tickets to automate. So I'm adding tickets to I use Jira ticketing system, and I add tickets to, oh, I'm going to start doing this process, but in 3 months. I really don't have time for start this because we really are like overloading the number of tickets that we're starting to get for automate. And I think that's the impact of how the organization is taking the automations now. And also processes of automation are starting to take impact in our applications and web services where our clients are directly feeding their input data from automated processes that we're running in check if something is online in our database, checking something is running into one of our web page, check also if something is working in a supplier web page. We are running automation processes through our company and through suppliers web pages and services using RPA.
To add on to that, I mean, for example, I am the only one on the sourcing team with access to UiPath. So what I did is I asked the rest of the people on my team, like, hey, if there's anything that you think could be automated, that you're working and doing the same thing every day, let me know, and maybe we can have that discussion and figure out a solution for it. So my one coworker, she came to me with, hey, I'm sending out this report every single day. It takes up a half hour of my time, and it's the same process. So I was like, that is a perfect thing. And it was actually, I think, one of my first bots that I developed. So what we did, we were able to pull a report from SharePoint, and it was able to, filter, delete columns, all that good stuff that you would normally do manually in Excel, and then spit out a report and email it to those coworkers who needed to see it at the end of the day. And that was a huge value saver for her. And now she's able to work on more of those critical thinking tasks. So it's been very valuable to me and my team.
That's excellent. It's interesting. We just did a very large survey and we asked employees, both citizen developers and users, what are you going to do with the time that you get back from automation? And overwhelmingly, the answers were professional development, personal development, and higher value tasks. So there's a real appetite from employees right now to reclaim that time and go spend it more effectively.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for me, business is growing at such a fast rate. So I really needed to take the time and say, what can I eliminate as much as I can? So with the bots now being in place, I am able to focus way more on some of the new things that are coming in. And my work is now better because of it. So it's been, huge for me. That's
great. Joe and Jen, what processes have you automated for yourselves or for other people that have made a meaningful impact?
So I can tell you that one of my previous processes that I do is we used to get replenishment reports for clients, and the task itself wasn't very difficult. It was just a daily report that we got every day. Actually, Jose and his team automated the reporting part before. But the next step to that was actually to send out the emails and get quotes from suppliers. And it's not a very complicated task, but it was time consuming and it happened every day. So I was able to automate that part of the portion, that part of my morning, so that I was able to focus on, the more strategic project that I had on hand. And I think, as Taryn mentioned, our business is growing so rapidly. Instead of, we're looking to scale our size appropriately. And I think by having these automations in place and training us in these different skills and in these different programs, it makes us more valuable because we're still able to complete the tasks that we already had to complete, but because we have the extra bandwidth, we can even take on more tasks.
Interesting, John. Yet another instance of the incremental gains or that interest that's happening from these different angles.
Yeah, and just to add to that, it makes work a little bit more fun, right? Because the tasks that we're automating are the more repetitive, mundane tasks. So like once I get that out of the way, I focus on the critical thinking and the more exciting the more exciting parts of my day that I have to work on.
Absolutely. Joe, you had mentioned before the task that you started with. Anything for other people or for the department thing where a broader group of people has had an impact?
The bot that I created is very much similar to what Jen just mentioned, is that it was a already generated canned report, and there were multiple other aspects where I needed to make that data usable for other folks on my team. And so again, there was some reformatting, putting columns in, doing things like that. And as John mentioned, not a ton of time, but as I mentioned earlier, the peace of mind of knowing that I press that button and I get a perfect answer every time really helps me start my day pretty well. And then as far as impact, like I said, throughout the team, that is in fact impacting the rest of the team by giving me a more consistent output on these. For example, linking to this data, if there's one of those steps is missed, you don't necessarily know right away that you've missed something, and that can turn into problems later down the road. So again, that I can't overstate the value of that peace of mind that you get through automation. And then as an advocate, I think is me having the experience and then showing, I'll show people these. I'll show them the bot in action and just say, hey, when you guys are doing your work, I want to show you what I did for this simple thing that I have. And I take the opportunity to do that to get the creative juices flowing. And again, I'm relatively new to the company, and so there's still a lot of opportunity in the future. But I mean, it's something that I can see the wheels turning, and it's just a matter of time before another one of those grabs, and we have another bot that we can put online.
That's great. And it's interesting that you say that, because when we survey, and I experienced this as a customer as well of UiPath, and when we survey people, if you don't have exposure to RPA, it's often very difficult for people to think about what could be automated. There's no context there. You haven't seen it work. You haven't seen it operate. But when you show people, just like you said, and then all of a sudden you give them that aha moment where they think, oh, if that can be automated, here are other things that I might be able to automate. Again, it starts to change the way that they think about what's possible. So, John, I'm really curious. You're a big advocate of these folks. It's very clear why the benefits here are.
Told you they were the all-star team.
I'm curious, to you, same sort of question. What is the impact that you're seeing on the broader organization, whether they're getting the benefits of the RPA, whether they're interacting with your team? How are you seeing this team play out and contributing to the culture?
Yeah, I mean, just like everybody said, I think you've gotten sort of a smattering of anything that I would say, frankly. But just to reinforce it, people believe in it. From our very first automation, some of them were. I would be asked to grab, like screen videos, and Jose and I would be sitting there saying it's just black code sometimes, or it's just the robot's doing something, you can't actually see it. So what was funny was when Joe mentioned when people see it, we actually hunted for a couple processes that we could just record and show them, like specifically, let's develop this one next, just so we can show it to them and we can put this to bed, So we did a few of those like screen scraping exercises where, hey, it opens a file, it goes through. And so we started to get that buy-in, and it really is, it was mentioned before, even if it's not leaving a meeting, I'm not kidding that I've seen project plans where, we have very detailed project plans here at SDI, let me tell you, but where step 47 is develop bot for blah, 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 because client will not use middleware or something like that. Boom. And like these things they're literally being thought of at the macro level for a client, before we even need to drill down and say, oh, what are we doing? I mean, we have people at all levels of the organization that understand the power that we have and work it into their plan. I mean, if that's not a testament, I don't know what is.
And just to add on to that, I think it's cool to have I think it's been very useful to have the citizen development program, because for someone like me, I have no experience in automation coding or anything like that. So I feel like it really increases awareness and education for all employees. So you have we have about 10 people so far, but we're all in different departments. So we're able to spread that knowledge to our other teams as well. And I'm sure Jose and John have seen that their requests for automations hopefully has decreased. But not only that, when they do get requests, it's structured. So like, instead of getting these wild ideas that they want to get automated, because there's more education in the company overall, I'm sure they're seeing more defined requests that are either possible or not, but it's more clearly laid out. And I can tell you from the other side of things, a lot of times in the past when we wanted to have a system automated, since our team only consisted of John and Jose, we'd have to go to them for everything, but not just us, but all different departments. And I think one of the most time consuming things for maybe someone in automation who hasn't worked in purchasing before, or who hasn't worked in these other departments, for us to ask them the automated process, we'd have to teach them the whole process, right? So it took a lot of, I guess, video recording, I'm assuming, and a lot of talking to the users who needed it to be automated. There's a lot of training involved, or teaching involved in that was time consuming. Whereas now, if we want a project or program or project automated ourselves, our process automated ourselves, we know exactly the steps that need to be taken place. So like, for example, Taryn and another citizen developer, Kevin, we've been meeting in these meetings, and instead of having to, I noticed there's a change in dialogue, instead of having to be like, hey, this is our system, this needs to be automated. We already know the process because we work with it every day. So the conversation changes from, hey, what is it that we need to do, to we're more thinking about the bugs that come along, like, hey, we can do this, but we expect this might occur. So like, we're kind of troubleshooting along the way. So yeah, so I think the whole brainstorming conversation changes a little bit, and it's interesting because now you're working with developers who know the process more than maybe someone in the automation team, because obviously they're in different departments. So and they deal with a lot of other projects. So that's been a cool part of this as well.
Absolutely. I think I heard a couple of things there. I heard there's a collective consciousness across the organization, and the work that you're doing, the work that the COE is doing, this is all, it's like everybody's evolving together. And some of the byproducts of this isn't just direct automation. It's also how people think about automation, how they ask for automation. And Jose, I'm really curious to go back to you. You're talking about the tickets that are getting submitted. You've got the COE building automations. You have the citizen developers building automations. Do you have a way of thinking about what business processes are better suited for the COE, or what's better suited for a citizen developer?
The tickets that I mostly handle are tickets that require to be running on a daily basis, and they cannot break. Like, there is no way that one of my processes cannot work. If it fails, it's like something is going to happen, and a client is going to be like requiring that data in the moment. Or
They're mission critical. That's what you're looking for, Jose. Mission critical automations. It means if it breaks, things go wrong.
And also I handle most of the projects that require interaction with the databases or interaction with system. Like, mostly of my process feeds other processes. Like, for example, one of the processes that I handle is web scraping of products, and my process feeds other processes. And one of the processes that it feeds another UiPath automation that another employee has. Like, some of my processes also feeds other automations and other not automation from other employees. But that's mostly the data that I handle. And the citizen developers handle a lot of data automations, but for their department, and do not require that much integration with other departments. That's how we have been working, but I have been recently seen that UiPath citizen developers have been working really well with other departments and starting to get along, as long as they are like learning more with their course, because like it's really hard, like at the beginning of developing, how are you going to learn how a robot works? And I have seen a really huge progress in the automation developers, because now I'm like seeing some of the process, and they're like really manipulating data as a, as a good level for that.
Interesting. So I think I heard the COE is very well suited for things that are mission critical, that has restricted access, whether it's databases or other systems, processes that are integrated when there's a multi-step process, and you need to make sure that those inputs and outputs line up. And that from a citizen development standpoint, working with the data that they have access to is good. But I think I also heard in there, the citizen developer line is pushing up. You're seeing more complex processes as time goes on, and the citizen developer is able to handle more essentially within those automations.
Oh yeah, there was one process especially that I thought that it was like me and John, we thought that it was like the most possible, it was the most possible automated possible, the report. We were like, oh yeah, that's like the most. And one of the citizen developers just developed an automation for that automation. I was like, oh my God, like I'm really surprised of this. it was really like, I thought that this report was like, yeah, like an SQL report. It was like, that's like the most automated possible result that we can bring out to the people. And then someone else came and bring another automation to the automation, and I was like, that's really impressive. Like that was something.
Yeah, and you know, to add on to that, part of the challenge is, you know, the UiPath and automation can do so many things. You know, it's not just web scraping, it's not just files. But when you're trying to recruit for this, when I'm going out and getting my team together, I have to go with what they know, right? If I come in and say, hi, you're going to be a developer now, I'll scare the heck out of them. But if I say, I know you live in Excel, this does Excel really good. It's not just Excel macro. You know, I'm not telling you that, hey, you can write Excel macros and do what this does, but this is your taste. And I think that's what Jose is kind of referring to is, you know, when we're not when we're talking about IT is totally different. You know, when we're talking about citizen developers, Excel, at least in our business, was the most relatable skill to say, hey, if you can maybe think about formulas that self-populate, if you could think about macros, that's kind of what we're doing. And then, you know, maybe, okay, take it a step further. And what if that Excel sheet, you could make a robot to go in and pull the query for you first out of a web GUI? Or, you know, whether you could take that input and drop it into a web GUI, you know, so I wasn't asking for the moon. I was asking for suspend your disbelief just a little bit, you know, and I feel like that helped, because now, to Jose's point, we went from, yeah, they'll do reporting and we'll take care of the rest, to, wow, they're doing reporting and they're pulling the query and they're making modifications to it and they're entering it into a web page. Like, whoa, you know, did we think they'd get there? Sure. But, you know, we started this in November. We're sitting here at the end of May, and we told them flat out, you have 3 or 4 months to learn, right? So when you think about that, that's tremendous progress, especially when, you know, we're very happy with what's going on, but I wouldn't say we were pushing the gas pedal all the way down. You know, we could have certainly applied more pressure, and we didn't think it was appropriate. And I mean, the results have been astounding.
That's great. Taryn, I'd like to come back to you and kind of continue this conversation and key off something that you said earlier. When this is a process to learn, right? And John kind of laid out, there's the right amount of pressure. You know, you don't want to be too aggressive here. You don't want to take it too casually. So I'm really curious, and I want to see if we can uncover some challenges here, or, you know, what, you know, if you look back, tell us a little bit about that pressure, that expectation, you know, what you did, and would you go back? Would you do anything differently?
Yeah, so this was a lot of trial and error, and it still is today with developing a lot of the bots. So it's very hard to not get down in the dumps when you're stuck on one formula. But it's been very resourceful. I mean, the resources are there. With Studio X, for example, I mean, I found personally online that more of the blog posts and whatnot were more tailored towards Studio. So that was a learning curve, just because I had to take something that might have been a little different in Studio and then change it to something that would go for Studio X, and just finding like the little difference of the, you know, formulas there. But overall, I mean, I don't think I would go back and change anything, because that was all part of the process itself. But no, it's been very valuable, and going to other citizen developers as well, and feeding off of their information and their bots. It's been great.
That's great. Joe, I'm curious from you, as you've come into RPA with some coding background, as you've seen your peers also on their journey. What have some of the challenges been for you, and would you have done anything differently, or would you recommend that somebody else take an action as they go down their own journey here?
Absolutely, and I think this is something that I hear it in our meetings, from our regular meetings, like John talked about. Is it's always a time constraint, and that for me was the biggest one. And however, part of that is that initial inertia of getting over the learning curve at the beginning. And I think that was a challenge of like, okay, it's a new language, basically. Yes, I have some background in programming or automation that makes this intuitively, logical to me. But at the same time, it's like learning a new language. You've got the idiosyncrasies that you're not going to know. And so getting over that hump was really made easier by the fact that every time I fire up the app, it puts the training in my face. And so I eventually took the bait and actually executed on some of that training, because a lot of it I figured I could, based on my experience, I could do it myself. And to a great extent I could, but the value in going back and actually doing the provided training, I think, it provides real results in the end, I guess, because that may be that one thing that I sit through the 5 minutes of a video tutorial or a slideshow that says, aha, that's the one thing I was looking for. And at the same time, the repetition of going through those trainings on things that I believe I already know, might kind of tweak a perspective that I might have caused me a lot of time, in the future, because I assumed that it was the same as something else I've worked with. So again, I guess to me, so that would be the thing. I would have probably done that a little sooner. But outside of that, figuring out a way to get more time and more hours in a day. But I don't think we're going to solve that one here today, unless somebody comes and makes a bot for that.
That message actually really resonates with me, because that's exactly how I started my journey in 2016. It was taking the online trainings, learning what was possible, and then putting it to the test, saying, how can I prove to myself that this is going to be a net benefit to me? Excellent. So we need to wrap up now, although literally I could keep talking with you all for hours. I think there's so much depth of experience, and each of your journeys is unique, yet there are these common threads across what all of you have experienced. I would like to end the conversation by asking each one of you, along your journey, what's been an aha moment for you, a moment where you realized that maybe the way the code works, how you interact with people, whatever the case may be, that it provided you new insight, new access, changed the trajectory of your experience. So maybe, Joe, we could start with you. Through this journey, what's been something that has just been that aha moment that's helped clarify your approach here?
I guess for me, the aha moment probably happened a long time ago, before I actually was with UiPath, just the concept of automation in general. And the aha moment for me with UiPath was how far it's progressed since I've worked in automation in the past, and the ease of integrating applications that people use every day. And I've had a little bit of that in the past with like Visual Basic automation and things like that. You get a limited scope there, but the breadth of scope that you can do, from going from Excel to taking that Excel file and emailing it to someone, and automating that process, and then taking responses back and categorizing those and doing something with that. Those concepts to me were like, things that I imagined previously, and seeing that starting to come to fruition with these tools, I think was my little baby aha moment.
I think that's great. And I've often been asked, why now? why is RPA becoming interesting now? Automation has been around forever. And I think one of the main reasons is it's never been this easy and it's never been this powerful, right?
Agreed.
I think that's really good. Taryn, let's put you in the hot seat. What's been an aha moment that you've experienced?
For me personally, I mean, it's helped to get my name out within the company as a developer. So it's been huge for my personal growth. You know, John may have something that he might not have the time to work on, so from a different department altogether. So he might pass along, be like, hey, I think this is something, you know, you're capable of doing. So it's really been able to get myself involved with outside of my own department of sourcing and into other realms within the business. So it's been huge for my personal development, very beneficial.
That is awesome. And it is such in line with some of that research that I mentioned earlier around personal development, professional development, and these tools providing an avenue for that. Jen, maybe we can go to you. Same question. What's been an aha moment as you've gone through this journey?
I think my biggest aha moment happened or occurred when I was building my first bot. So like I mentioned before, I had no real background in automation or coding or anything like that. I went through the trainings, and because the trainings are very detailed step by step, I was like, oh yeah, I can do this, I can do this. But when you actually build your first bot, you realize how much troubleshooting and how much time it actually takes. But every time I was able to figure out a task that I was initially stuck on, I was like, aha, I can do this, right? And I think the biggest gratification or satisfaction I felt was when I completed my first bot. I'm like, wow, I actually did all this. Like I had no experience before. I can do this. And after I finished my first bot and then moving on to additional projects, I always think like, yeah, I could build a bot for this, right? So that was my biggest aha, I can do this.
Very cool. And, you know, I think I heard a theme in there too, of something else that we hear. It changes the way people think about business outcomes, right? You start looking at it from, okay, what's a human element? What's a robot element? And now you've got the kind of the breadth of thinking to include both of those.
Exactly.
Very cool.
Yeah, I didn't realize how complex it was. Like even if it's a simple process, you don't actually realize how much steps or how much, you know, what work it takes to automate something. So I think each part of that was like, oh my God, I got this now. So like moving forward, building additional feature bots, it's been an easier process.
That's excellent. Jose, over to you. And probably the question is hardest for you because you've gone through these different phases of the RPA journey. What's something that really stuck out to you as being that aha moment?
Yeah. Well, since I started in SDI, I was not always an automation developer. My first job was a full-time job serving in a business side of the company. As long as I start automating, I start getting more time for me and more time for personal development, for learn more and research. I really had like I needed to work in the beginning a little bit more than the 8 hours because it was something new for me and I was like learning that business processes. And as long as I start automating, I was like maybe just being able to do my 8-hour jobs in like 4 hours. And I was able to start moving my requirements from just doing that business job to also start developing new tools for other parts of the company. And as long as I was developing that new tools, I developed some tools that were able to process millions and millions of requests that were obviously not able to do by a human at that time. So I was starting to be like, oh my God, if I develop more, I'm going to have even more free time for develop more. And it's going to be like a complete cycle that is going to be, I will be owning my time. I will have like more time for read and do whatever I like to do in the company instead of be like doing manual tasks that can be done by a bot that is going to develop more time, even more time. It's going to be like a full cycle. And that was my aha moment that I was like, I really need to start putting more attention in development and automation in the company. And 2 months after that, I got moved to a full-time automation developer position.
That's great. So I'm hearing this virtuous circle of I'm building, I'm freeing up time. I can be even more effective. I can build more. I can free up more time.
Yeah, no, completely. I think that I start like with maybe 2 or 3 processes. I'm sure that at least I have right now 50 processes. and each process is like 3-4 hours automations per day. Like a lot of processes automated. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. So John, to you, what's been your aha moment as you've experienced this whole journey, this whole life cycle?
Sure. So I'm going to give you one for me and then one, I think, for the company, that even though it was recently, I think it made it so people could not hide this anymore, right? Could not. For me, it was very simple. Right at the beginning, I told you I came from sourcing, and we were able to build bots to get quotes for us like that. Whether we had access to data files that we could pull them from and look them up, or various API connections, things like that. I went from needing to find quotes to they just came to me. So, as a sourcing person at heart, I know I'm involved in this technical stuff, but awesome, very cool stuff. As far as the company, I'll give you two of them. They happened about a year apart, but I think they're both as relevant because we've grown a lot. So we have a lot of new people. We do a lot of confirming, of orders where we, have to reach out and hey, did you get this? Hey, what's the tracking number? And yeah, guess what? We don't do that anymore. There's a robot. It used to be an email. Robot sends the email. Robot updates statuses. As there needs to be human intervention, of course, in certain instances with rush orders or back orders. And, that's, of course, what we talked about, right? Who says it has to be 100%, right? You're spending your time on the exceptions, on the value adds, right? And I'm talking, this is to the order of thousands, tens of thousands of purchase orders a month, so this is tremendous return here. And secondarily, a little bit after I got put into this position, I saw the company send out an email saying, we're integrated with UPS Quantum View. And I said, wow, I'm the robot guy. Give me that. Like, we could do a lot of stuff with that. Like, let's mark orders shipped. Let's tell people where they are, just like you experience in everyday life. And they said, well, that's not what we meant. And I said, what? And so Jose and I spent the better part of 6 months gaining support. And finally, we went to them with a working UPS API and said, look, give me an order. I'll tell you where it is. And, one of the, I'll censor it for you, but as the SLT calls it, it's the "Where's my bleep" app. Their least favorite question to get was "Where's my bleep?" And I built a robot, or we collectively built a robot to answer that for them. And now that's not just, happening in our systems. This is in our mobile app that's exposed to the public. So, this is like groundbreaking kind of stuff for our industry. And I don't care who you are in this company, you cannot deny the impact that has made.
That's awesome. Final question to you, John, and then we'll wrap up. What advice do you have for somebody else beginning their journey, whether they're a citizen developer or a COE lead or a sponsor? If they're just on the precipice of this, what would you tell them?
Don't be afraid. It's an iterative process. You will never build a robot the first time. I don't mean even when you're really good, something's going to screw up. You're always going to have an exception, and that's fine. You need to understand that this is a learning process. And listen, everybody's different. To me, that's why I love it. We started with saying this is the journey. Just by doing my work every day, I'm getting smarter. I'm getting better. The company is getting better. So I would say to anyone who's interested in that, you will have the same experience. You'll struggle sometimes. I drew it in the air before when Taryn mentioned, when you get frustrated and then all of a sudden it works. I'm sure you've seen like the digital transformation pit of despair, that graph, right? You promise. Oh gosh, this is hard. Oh gosh. And then all of a sudden, actually, it kind of pans out. And I think that would be the experience. I would tell anybody who's going to get into this to take a look at that graph and expect that, because you will have tremendous promise. You will have some struggles, but you will benefit and you will become much better for it as a professionally, personally, and as an organization, in my opinion.
That's great. Thank you all very sincerely. Thank you for the time that you've spent today talking about your journeys, talking about the good stuff, the challenging stuff, how you've overcome it, how you've worked through it. I think there's a tremendous amount of wisdom to extract from your conversations. So we're very appreciative and really looking forward to what you're going to do next in this space.
Us too. Really looking forward to the new cool stuff coming out in UiPath. So likewise.